She stood at the foot of the cross when her son was crucified. And then the Bible goes almost completely silent about Mary. For 30 years, history records almost nothing. In the days after the crucifixion, as the earliest followers of Jesus gathered in Jerusalem, the New Testament offers one final, unmistakable glimpse of Mary. The book of Acts describes the small, uncertain community waiting together, their future unknown. In the midst of this gathering, a single verse stands out. They all joined together constantly in prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus. Acts 1, verse 14. Mary is there, not as a distant memory or a figure set apart, but as a living presence among the believers. She prays with them, side by side with the apostles and the women who had followed Jesus from Galilee. The text does not place her above the others, nor does it give her a separate role. Instead, she is woven into the fabric of the earliest church, sharing in the hope, the fear, and the longing that filled that upper room. This brief mention is the last clear word the New Testament gives about Mary. There are no further stories, no details about her later years. Yet in this single verse, the silence that follows becomes more meaningful. Mary remains steadfast in prayer, part of the community at the very moment the church is about to be born. Her presence lingers in the quiet, a witness to both the end of one story and the beginning of another. At the foot of the cross, as the sky darkened and the world seemed to unravel, a single act of care unfolded between Jesus, his mother, and the beloved disciple. The Gospel of John records his words. From that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. In the midst of unimaginable loss, Jesus did not leave Mary's future to chance. He entrusted her to someone he loved, making sure she would not face the coming days alone. This moment is more than a legal arrangement or a passing command. It is the last act of a son for his mother, spoken with tenderness even as he suffered. The language is simple, but the meaning runs deep. The disciple, traditionally understood as John, opened his home to Mary, offering her shelter, protection, and the quiet dignity of belonging. In a world where widows and mothers could be left vulnerable, this gesture was both practical and profoundly loving. For Mary, the days after the crucifixion must have been filled with grief and uncertainty. Yet from that hour, she was not left to wander or mourn in isolation. The household she entered became a place of consolation, shaped by the memory of Jesus' love and the promise of new family. Here, in the shadow of the cross, the story of Mary's later life begins, not with a grand miracle, but with the quiet assurance that she was cared for, seen, and cherished. Long after the final lines of Scripture fall silent about Mary's path, a centuries-old tradition quietly points to the city of Ephesus. Early Christian memory links the Apostle John to this place. Irenaeus, writing in the late 2nd century, records that John spent his last years in Ephesus, teaching and guiding the church there. Eusebius, the first great church historian, echoes this testimony, drawing on earlier sources to describe how John's presence shaped the Christian community of Asia Minor. For many, these ancient voices laid the groundwork for a belief that Mary, entrusted to John's care, may have journeyed with him to Ephesus. The tradition, though never stated in the New Testament, grew in strength over the centuries. It found new life in the visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich, a 19th century German mystic. Emmerich described in vivid detail a modest stone house on a wooded hill outside Ephesus, where she believed Mary spent her last years. Her devotional account inspired explorers and pilgrims to search for the place she described. In 1881, a French priest named Abbé Julien Gouillet followed Emmerich's directions, and discovered a small stone building on the slopes of Mount Ceressos. The house, simple and weathered, soon became known as the House of the Virgin Mary. Archaeological studies noted its early Christian features, and the site quickly drew the devotion of travelers and faithful alike. Today, it stands as a pilgrimage destination, drawing visitors from around the world. Several popes, including Paul VI and John Paul II, have prayed there, lending the site a special place in modern Catholic devotion. Whether the house is authentic is debated. The Ephesus tradition endures, not as a settled fact, but as a thread woven through Christian memory. It speaks to the longing to trace Mary's steps beyond the written record, to imagine her final years in the company of the beloved disciple, in a land far from her Galilean home. A second tradition, just as enduring, holds that Mary never left Jerusalem. In the centuries after the Apostles, Christian pilgrims traced her memory not to the hills of Asia Minor, but to the heart of the city where the church began. On Mount Zion, the Church of the Dormition stands as a witness to this belief, a place where, according to ancient custom, Mary's earthly life came to a gentle close. Byzantine texts and early pilgrimage accounts describe a community that gathered here, venerating the spot where Mary is said to have fallen asleep among those who loved her. The stone walls of the Dormition Church, layered with centuries of devotion, echo the prayers of generations who saw Jerusalem as Mary's final home. In these traditions, she remains close to the soil of her people, woven into the story of the city that shaped the earliest followers of Jesus. We cannot be certain which is correct. The silence of history leaves room for faith and for memory, each tradition keeping alive a different hope about Mary's last years. She was not left alone. She was not forgotten. In the earliest days of the church, Mary's presence was more than a memory. It was a living thread woven through the hearts of those who had known her Son. She was the Mother of the Lord. To the first believers, this was not a title to be set aside or a bond to be erased by time. It was a truth that shaped how they saw her, how they spoke of her, and how they cared for her. As the years passed and the story of Jesus spread from Jerusalem to distant cities, Mary remained a figure of deep reverence. Early Christian writings and traditions, though often silent on details, echo with respect for her role as a witness to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The silence of the New Testament after Acts does not mean neglect or abandonment. Instead, it reflects a quiet dignity, a life honored in the community, cherished by those who remembered her words, her courage, and her faith. Within the households of the faithful, she was regarded not only as a mother, but as a living link to the mystery of Christ. Her presence offered reassurance to those who struggled to believe, and her story became a source of comfort for generations who came after. In every tradition that preserves her memory, the same conviction endures. She was not left to face the world alone. She was not forgotten. The Bible offers no account of Mary's final days. After Acts chapter 1 verse 14, the scriptural record falls silent. This silence has left Christians across the centuries with questions that Scripture itself does not answer. In that quiet, different traditions have grown, each seeking to honor Mary's life in their own way. For Catholics, the belief in Mary's Assumption stands at the heart of devotion. In 1950, Pope Pius XII gave this teaching its clearest form in the Apostolic Constitution Munificentissimus Deus, and declared that the most blessed Virgin Mary, after completing the course of her earthly life, was assumed body and soul into heavenly glory. This teaching draws on centuries of reflection, liturgy, and the writings of early church fathers, though it is not found in the New Testament itself. The Orthodox churches speak instead of the Dormition. In their liturgy and icons, Mary's death is described as a gentle falling asleep surrounded by the apostles, before her soul is received by God. The Dormition is remembered every August, not as a moment of disappearance, but as a peaceful passage woven into the rhythm of worship and prayer. Most Protestant communities, mindful of the Bible's silence, do not claim to know what happened in Mary's last moments. They honor her as the mother of Jesus, but stop short of making dogmatic statements about her death or assumption, choosing instead to respect what the Scriptures reveal and what they leave unsaid. This is an honest theological disagreement that has existed for centuries. The silence of Scripture has not ended devotion or reverence. It has simply left space for faith, tradition, and honest difference to coexist. Luke 1:38 records Mary's answer to the angel, "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled." That sentence of surrender defined her entire life. From the beginning, Mary's story is shaped not by certainty or control, but by a willingness to accept what she cannot understand. She welcomes the unknown, bearing a son whose life will upend her own, and stands beside him through joy, confusion, and heartbreak. When the world grew dark at the cross, when the path ahead was hidden, her answer did not change. She remained the Lord's servant, trusting even when the future was silent. This quiet faithfulness runs through every mention of her in the Gospels and Acts. Whether she is named or not, her presence is felt in the upper room, in the shared prayers, in the care received from the beloved disciple. The details fade, but the thread of surrender holds. In a time when so much was uncertain, Mary's trust endured. She did not need to know the ending to remain faithful. Her story is not one of grand declarations, but of steady, patient hope, a hope that carries through the silence and lingers long after the written record falls away. Mary's surrender was not a single moment, but a lifelong answer. It is this quiet courage, more than any tradition or legend, that keeps her memory alive wherever her story is told. Mary's story fades into silence, yet her example of quiet faith endures. Today, that silence invites us to reflect on what it means to trust without answers. Mystery remains. So does the call to live with the same surrender. Thank you for joining this journey of wonder and remembrance.